The night pulsed with sirens over the cracked streets of Chicago, Illinois. Officer Ryan Carter, tall and weathered from years of service, pressed his back against the jagged brick wall of a convenience store, gun drawn, scanning for movement. His radio hissed urgent voices, warning that the suspect was armed and hiding somewhere close. Then, out of the silence between footsteps and shouts, came a sound that didn't belong: thin, high, and trembling. Ryan's head turned sharply. Just beyond the shattered glass door, amidst spilled groceries and blood-stained tiles, two glistening eyes stared back at him from the shadows. Not human, not threatening. A kitten, barely alive, crouched behind a stack of fallen cardboard boxes. Its fur clung wet to its fragile frame, ears flattened, chest heaving with tiny, desperate breaths. In the middle of a crime scene still dripping with danger, the creature looked impossibly out of place, like a ghost begging to be seen. "Carter, move! We've got movement in the back!" Someone barked from the alley. His grip tightened on the weapon, instincts pulling him toward the hunt. But his gaze was chained to that trembling body in the dark. He could hear it now, the faint squeaks, almost drowned by the noise of radios and boots. Each cry felt like it was cutting through the chaos straight into his chest. The kitten tried to retreat deeper into the debris, scraping weakly against shards of glass, its paws too small to carry it far. A fresh wave of shouting rose as officers sprinted past, one yelling, "Suspect's got a knife!" The scene spun into raw urgency, but Ryan's focus refused to break. He could sense the little creature's fear radiating into the cold air. Every tremor of its body echoing the panic he had seen in victims clinging to survival. He lowered his weapon slightly, crouching just enough to make himself smaller, his breath fogging in the chilled night. "Easy now," he murmured, the words barely audible beneath the chaos. The kitten froze, its body coiled like a spring, ready to vanish. Then, a violent crash rang out from the alley, metal bins toppling, and the sound sent shockwaves through the crime scene. Officers screamed commands, guns cocked, boots thundered. The kitten flinched, squealing as though the whole world had cracked open. Ryan felt the surge of adrenaline pulling him both ways. Duty demanded his presence at the fight, but something primal locked his body near the broken door. The kitten was shivering uncontrollably, claws scraping as it tried to burrow into the cardboard. He extended one gloved hand slowly, fingers steady in the quivering glow of his flashlight. The air smelled of iron, smoke, and fear, heavy enough to choke. The seconds stretched impossibly long. The kitten's wide eyes glistened with the reflection of red and blue lights, flickering like fire and water. For an instant, its tiny body leaned forward, teetering between retreat and surrender. Ryan held his breath, steady as stone. All around, the scene was chaos, men shouting, suspects resisting, cuffs clashing against concrete. Yet here, in the narrow pool of light, the world had shrunk to one fragile heartbeat. And then, against every odds, the kitten took one trembling step toward him, another. Its paws barely touched the glass, but it moved closer, eyes locked on his hand. At that exact moment, an officer yelled, "Carter, we need you now." The choice slammed into him like a bullet. Abandon the fragile life reaching out, or drop everything he knew about protocol and catch it before it disappeared forever. Ryan's pulse thundered in his ears. The command to join the arrest echoed behind him, but the kitten's tiny frame pressed forward, wobbling on unsteady legs. Its paw landed on a shard of glass, and a sharp squeak broke from its throat. Ryan's body moved before his mind caught up. He dropped his weapon low, swept his arm under the fragile creature, and lifted it clear of the debris. The kitten collapsed against his chest, shivering, its heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. "Carter, what the hell are you doing?" A voice roared from the alley. He didn't answer. The kitten's warmth was faint, almost fading, and he instinctively cupped his hand around its body, shielding it from the night. Sirens screamed louder as the suspect was wrestled to the ground. Officers cursed and shouted, but Ryan felt as though he were standing in a different world, one where silence demanded his attention. The kitten buried its face against the rough fabric of his vest, claws catching in the material, refusing to let go. Ryan's jaw clenched. He knew he was supposed to rejoin the fight, to help secure the scene. Instead, he tightened his arm around the fragile life, refusing to let it slip back into the darkness. "I've got you," he whispered, the words foreign on his tongue, rough but steady. Boots thundered up behind him. Officer Delgado, sweat glistening across his forehead, stopped short. "You're telling me that's what you picked up?" In the middle of this, his voice dripped disbelief, almost mocking. Ryan lifted his eyes to meet Delgado's, unblinking, his silence sharper than any retort. The other man shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable," before sprinting back into the alley. The alley rang with the metallic snap of handcuffs and the rasp of heavy breathing. The suspect was caught. The danger, at least for now, had passed. Ryan finally lowered his weapon to his holster, freeing both hands to cradle the kitten. He studied it under the streetlight, fur matted, paws scraped raw, ribs pushing against its skin. The creature was a ghost of survival, and yet it had chosen him in that chaos. An officer passing by glanced at him with a smirk. "Leave it, Carter. It won't last the night anyway." The words hit like a blade, casual but cruel. Ryan's grip tightened. The kitten's faint mew rose again, as if answering the dismissal, a fragile protest against being discarded. His throat burned with something unspoken, a defiance boiling up that he hadn't felt in years. He stepped away from the store, blocking out the chatter of radios and the scorn of his peers. The night air carried the bitter scent of gunpowder and damp asphalt, but in his arms was a fragile warmth he couldn't walk away from. Ryan had seen too many lives discarded as not worth saving. He wasn't about to add one more. The kitten stirred, lifting its head weakly. Its eyes caught the flashing lights, glowing like liquid fire in the dark. It released a single, rasping cry, so faint yet piercing that it silenced even Ryan's doubts. In that moment, he knew this wasn't a stray to abandon. This was a survivor who had chosen him, whether he was ready for it or not. The scene had begun to wind down, or at least it looked that way on the surface. Evidence markers glowed under the harsh beam of portable lamps, radios buzzed with clipped reports, and the suspect was said to be in custody at the far end of the alley. Yet Ryan couldn't feel any sense of closure. The kitten pressed against him was too light, its body trembling with the fragile persistence of life barely clinging on. He could feel every rise of its ribcage against his chest, the way its claws dug into the fabric of his vest, not in aggression, but in desperate need. Around him, officers gave sidelong glances, some with smirks, others with quiet disbelief. He ignored them all and kept walking toward his patrol car. The streets were icy, a thin frost clinging to the asphalt, and every breath he drew carried the metallic sting of gunpowder and cold. As Ryan moved, the kitten gave a weak mew, muffled against the collar of his jacket, and it sliced through the noise like a secret only he could hear. He pulled his jacket tighter, shielding the tiny creature from the biting wind. His steps were slow but deliberate, the kind of walk that drew attention without him meaning it to. He heard one of the younger officers whisper behind him, "Carter's lost it. Can you believe this?" Another answered with a laugh that carried a jagged edge, "Man's babysitting a stray in the middle of a bust." Ryan kept his eyes forward, jaw clenched, refusing to waste energy on their scorn. He reached his vehicle, placed one hand on the cold metal door handle, and prepared to open it. But a sharp voice cracked across the night before he could move further. "Carter, hold it right there." Sergeant Miller strode toward him with the authority of a hammer about to strike. His presence silenced the chuckles and whispers, drawing the attention of every officer within earshot. Miller's eyes narrowed on the bundle in Ryan's arms. "That's not procedure. You're contaminating a scene, carrying God knows what. Drop it now." The order landed heavy, but Ryan didn't move. The kitten shifted slightly in his arms, as if it had sensed the sudden spike in hostility. It gave another weak cry, the kind that crawled straight into his chest, and he instinctively cupped it closer, his hand shielding its head. The street felt charged, tension rippling like static before a storm. Miller's voice hardened. "I said drop it. This isn't a shelter. It's not our job to play savior." The words were sharp, dismissive, like a blade cutting something fragile. Ryan's silence, however, grew heavier with each second. A ripple of disbelief spread among the gathered officers. Some folded their arms, waiting for Ryan to back down. Others shook their heads, muttering about insubordination. Yet Ryan stayed rooted. He had obeyed countless orders in his career, many of them in moments where hesitation meant death. But this order, this command to abandon something alive, something that had chosen him, felt like a betrayal too deep to accept. His hands didn't loosen. Instead, with slow deliberation, he pulled the car door open, the hinges groaning against the cold, and slid onto the driver's seat. The kitten nestled instantly against him, shivering but clinging tighter, as though it understood the choice he was making. Miller's face flushed red in the harsh floodlights. "You're out of your damn mind, Carter. You're making a spectacle in front of the entire unit. Get rid of it now, or you'll regret it." The threat rang through the air, heavy and final. But before Ryan could answer, the night shattered again. A violent crash erupted from the alley, the metallic sound of dumpsters overturning, followed by shouts of "He's loose! Suspect's loose!" Officers scrambled instantly, adrenaline snapping the air taut once more. The man they thought restrained had broken free, turning the already fragile calm into chaos. Flashlights swung wildly as boots thundered down the alley. Someone shouted, "He's armed again!" And the urgency spiked to lethal. In the sudden storm of bodies charging past, one officer clipped Ryan's half-shut car door with his shoulder, nearly slamming it closed. The impact jolted him, and the kitten let out a terrified yelp, its claws digging deeper into his vest. For a split second, his grip slipped, the tiny body squirming as if it might be torn away into the confusion. Ryan's chest clenched, with panic losing it now would feel worse than any wound. He adjusted fast, pulling it back against him with both arms, refusing to let go. Miller's voice cut through the chaos like thunder. "Carter, get in the alley now. We need every man. We don't have time for this nonsense." Ryan's breath came ragged, his eyes darting between the storm of officers vanishing into the alley and the fragile life trembling in his arms. The choice weighed heavier than any command he had ever faced. One path demanded discipline, protocol, brotherhood in the line of fire. The other demanded something he hadn't given in years: compassion, that ignored the cost. Both paths carried consequences he couldn't escape. The kitten lifted its head weakly, its eyes catching the blur of red and blue lights. They reflected like twin embers, wide and unblinking, holding him captive. Then came the smallest sound, a rasping mewl, almost broken, yet piercing enough to cut through the chaos of men and orders and duty. Ryan's chest tightened. In that moment, he realized the city's noise, the crime, the shouting, all of it could be drowned out by one fragile voice that refused to be silenced. And with that realization, he knew whatever step he took next would alter more than just the outcome of this night. It would alter who he was allowed to be. The alley roared with chaos. Officers sprinted past Ryan, their flashlights slicing through the dark as shouts ricocheted between the walls. Somewhere ahead, the suspect's boots hammered against the pavement, wild and desperate. Ryan stood frozen at the mouth of the alley, the kitten clinging to him like a second heartbeat. He could feel Miller's glare stabbing his back, hear the orders barked at him. But all he saw was the darkness swallowing his team and the fragile weight pressed to his chest. His pulse raged, demanding action. He moved. One step, then another, his boots crunching against the frost-slick asphalt. But unlike the others, he didn't run wild into the dark, he ran with precision. One arm anchoring the kitten close while the other reached instinctively for his weapon. Every movement was measured, protective. The creature's small body jolted against him with each stride, but he held it firm, whispering low between breaths, "I've got you. Stay with me." The words weren't just for the kitten, they were for himself, grounding him against the storm. The suspect's shadow flickered against the brick walls ahead, erratic, broken by the beams of flashlights. A metallic clatter rang out. He'd knocked over another bin. Officers shouted commands, but their voices tangled into noise. Ryan broke from the pack, his stride cutting sharper, his focus burning past the distraction. The kitten whimpered at the sudden surge of noise, tucking its head tighter under his chin, as though sensing the danger vibrating through the air. Its fear only sharpened Ryan's own resolve. A flash of steel glinted. The suspect spun, knife in hand, cornered at the end of the alley. Officers hesitated for a split second, the tension stretching thin as wire. "Drop it." Voices roared in unison, but the man's eyes were wild, trapped animal eyes, desperate and dangerous. Ryan slowed his pace, shifting his grip to keep the kitten shielded. Its small heart beat so fast he feared it would break apart in his arms. He felt his own body tense like a coiled spring. One wrong move and everything would shatter. The suspect lunged. Not at Ryan, but toward the nearest officer, knife slicing the air. The struggle was instant, violent boots slipping on ice, arms colliding, grunts echoing in the night. Ryan surged forward, weaving through the chaos, his body shielding the kitten even as he threw himself into the fight. His free arm grabbed the suspect's wrist with a force that snapped bone against bone, twisting the blade down. Pain shot through his own arm, but he didn't let go. With a guttural growl, he wrenched the weapon away and drove the man to the ground, pinning him under his weight. The alley exploded with movement officers piling in, cuffs snapping shut, shouts of "Got him!" "He's down!" filling the air. Ryan's chest heaved, adrenaline pounding through his veins like fire. He looked down, half expecting to see the kitten gone. But no, it was still there, still pressed against him. Its wide eyes reflecting the flood of flashlights, unblinking, alive. Somehow, through the clash and violence, it hadn't slipped from his arms. Somehow, it had trusted him enough to stay. For a moment, the world went silent. The officers pulled the suspect up, dragging him away in curses and rattling cuffs, but Ryan heard nothing. He only felt the fragile creature stirring against him, releasing a sound so faint, so vulnerable, it cracked open everything he thought he had buried. The kitten lifted its head, pressed its nose weakly against the base of his throat, and then, so small he almost didn't notice, gave the softest nudge, like a gesture of thanks. It was not survival instinct, it was choice. Ryan froze, his breath catching. All the stares of his team, all the ridicule, all the risks, none of it mattered. The gesture was simple, but it felt like a vow sealed in that freezing alley. Trust given and a promise demanded in return. He lowered his head, whispering, "You're mine now. No one takes you from me." The kitten's eyes half closed, body sinking deeper into his chest, as though it had finally found a place safe enough to rest. And for the first time in years, Ryan felt the weight of a night not as burden, but as beginning.